My name is Anne Hennigan. My role is the head of machine learning and AI at Understanding Recruitment. I basically have started to think a bit more about diversity in tech, but particularly diversity in AI, as it is such a pressing issue. And I think sometimes it needs to be more of an open discussion. Instead of something that we don't want to talk about because it's not that good. So that's kind of why I've started this series. The series is called AI Anna, the diversity series, and the plan is to move into more more topical areas and just have that open line of communication. And I have a guest today, lovely Catherine Oxley. She is actually currently completing her master's in computer science, very close to the end, but also has quite a wealth of experience at Cult Beauty, Brando Media, and actually at this point moving more into AI and exploring a career in this sort of area. So hence why it was really important for me to speak to her today. So what we'll be talking about is diversity in technology. Why are we not diverse in technology? What is the impact that it's having on the industry? And what is the solution? Which, I doubt we're going to come to the exact solution today, but the more ideas we throw around, the more chance that they're going to be more accepted into the sort of mainstream tech industry. So just to start with, I thought I would run through some of the statistics because I think these really speak volumes. So according to diversityintech.co.uk, a study has shown the two biggest barriers for women in tech are a lack of mentors and a lack of female role models. Having little support can have an impact on gender diversity in tech, as it can cause uncertainty for those who are interested in entering the industry. And then the tech sector is expanding almost 3 times faster than the rest of the UK economy, and it is nearly worth 184 billion. However, diversity remains a key challenge for the tech sector, as it is only 15% of the tech workforce are from BAME backgrounds, and gender diversity is currently sitting at 19% compared to 49% for all other jobs, which I think is insane. And that's why I want to talk to Catherine, because I work in recruitment and hiring, but I guess I'm more of an external force, whether I'd love to know what it's actually like. So with all that being said, it would be great for me to stop talking a bit and to find out a bit more about our guest today. So it would be great to just find out a bit more about you, Catherine, and just kind of your situation right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a software engineer, and I've mostly been working in full stack web development and front end for the past 4 years or so. And as you said, I've recently decided to do a master's degree in computer science, and I'm moving more towards AI now. So I've had a very strange introduction into software engineering. I've kind of done it backwards. I think like a lot of women, they come to it later in life. And I think it's just really interesting what I'm learning about on this master's, and I can't wait to branch out into a kind of new domain. And also Anna has helped me find this new role, so many thanks to you. Thank you, Anna.
That's awesome. Yeah. So obviously you have been in lots of like the tech industry, but you've worked in a few different areas, hence e-commerce.
Yeah.
You're now moving into like an AI driven software technology, so that will be a completely new area. So you're always having to kind of reinvent yourself and like learn more and more and more, which I know is really a passion of yours. But kind of what motivated you to start in this industry? Because you didn't start in a computer science background, did you?
Yeah, I actually started with languages. So my undergraduate degree was in French. And I don't know why I didn't go for computing. I think it never occurred to me as a career. I never thought I had a special interest. I mean, I realized later on that I was very interested in tech in a way that was different from some of my friends. But growing up, even though I was around computers and tech, my dad was in software. It never actually occurred to me that it might be something I wanted to do. So yeah, I started with languages and French, which was something else that I really am passionate about. And then on my year abroad, actually, I was teaching a technology degree. So in France, students do their English lessons about technology and other things, so that they get a kind of hybrid course. So one of the courses I was teaching was tech, and I just loved it. And I think I realized I enjoyed it a lot more than some of the students I was teaching. So that's kind of where it all started. And I thought, you know, how can I actually get into this and do this for a job? So that was the initial thought, and then it all went from there.
That's amazing. And I just think now it makes so much sense of your interest in NLP and natural language processing, because you come from that sort of speech and language background anyway, so you have that sort of wider understanding on like a literature, and I did literature at university, so that's kind of how I relate to NLP.
Definitely, yeah.
But it just shows you don't have to come from the most conventional background, and sometimes people kind of hold themselves back a bit because they think okay, I've not done computer science, I've not done maths, for example, I can't go into that career. So did you find at any point you were like, did you just dive into it because you'd done that year abroad, or was there any concerns on your side before you kind of went into that sort of area?
Definitely. So I think initially what I really wanted to go into was gaming, actually, and building games. And that was what I was really interested in growing up. I really enjoyed gaming, and I thought, when I kind of discovered technology, I thought, oh, you know what would be really fun? I'd love to build these games that I've been playing. And then when I did a bit of research about that, I actually did some work experience at PlayStation and started like researching how I do that. But there was too big a block. I would have had to go back and do another degree in maths or physics, because it's so mathematical, that I started looking at other options, and that's how I went into web development, because it was something I also really enjoyed, and I could do something a lot quicker if I went into web development. So that was the initial process. So there was a block there. And I've obviously now done the Masters in Computer Science, but it took a long way to get there. And obviously after finishing a 4-year French degree, I didn't want to go do another 3-year maths degree. So there were some blocks initially.
And did you find the experience that you had before doing the Masters, was that really helpful in terms of kind of being on your game when you were doing your academia, like the second time round?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I kind of thought that the 4 years of experience would be enough to get onto a master's, despite not having the undergraduate degree in computer science. I thought that would kind of be enough, because I've worked practically with coding, and we work with more mathematical concepts all the time. But it was actually a really big struggle to get universities to believe that I could do maths, that I could do computer science, despite all that experience. So it was helpful, and now I'm on the degree, I see that it wasn't a block, the fact I didn't have a maths A level, for example, but it was a real sticking point for most universities that I hadn't got the STEM background initially. It really mattered to them, the academic side of it, so I had to fight quite hard to get a place, actually.
Really? That's so interesting, isn't it? Because I would have thought that would be something, particularly with your work experience, there's clearly a commitment there from your side to learn, not only come from a background that is non-conventional, but like you've been in the industry and you've worked hands-on in a way that I guess sometimes that you don't even get to do in academia. So that's really interesting. I don't know why that would be. Did you have any thoughts of why that might be, or is it just kind of the setup ways of doing things?
I think I initially went into it thinking, 4 years of experience is the same as a degree, and that should be fine. And I suppose it's I suppose obviously universities are going to have a more academic focus, because that's their domain. And perhaps I was naive to that initially. I think now I've done the degree, the maths was a big part of it. You do a lot of theoretical stuff that you don't necessarily ever touch again if you're working. You do every now and then, you do a bit of algorithm based work, but in general you don't touch on the maths practically. And so I did do a lot of preparation for that beforehand, but in hindsight it wasn't an issue. And I think university should be more open to people who don't necessarily have the academic background but who have industry experience, because the course was made a lot easier, I think, in terms of coding because of my experience, and it was beneficial to me in a few ways as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It does surprise me, and I just think those are like the blockers that stop people, and it's so interesting that could be like, we're probably going to talk about it a little bit more, but just right there from the root, like the heart of moving into a different industry, there's already like blockers in the way for people. So I can understand, like, obviously you're very persistent and you knew what you wanted, and like, good on you, and you know, you've done really well out of it, and you've kind of proved everyone wrong because you're doing amazingly. But in terms of, you know, other people might just feel like, oh, I'm not good enough, and that could be what it takes for them to think, okay, this is not the right career, I'm not good enough to get into it, which, you know, that is quite a hard pill to swallow probably.
Definitely. And I think you notice it in the industry as well, when you meet other women developers, because I think in general a lot of women do come to it later, and you notice that kind of hindrance. And also I think women remain junior for a bit longer than men, just because perhaps they've come into it later or from a different background. So it's definitely something you notice.
I just, even like thinking back to my childhood, and you know, I do think subconsciously, you know, I was pushed more towards the sort of arts. I think in a way, like, this is what you're good at. I did ICT and I did pretty well out of ICT, you know, it might be in different countries a different topic, but essentially computing on a junior secondary school basis. And I was decent at it, but it just was never even a conversation. Like, it was almost like, well, you're not going to do it, we're not even going to push you to do it. And I can't remember out of that class who then took it to A level in GCSE, I can't remember any one of them being a woman, which is insightful. True. So I just don't think, I think it's just a presumption that, you know, men like sciences and maths and ICT, and women like the arts.
Absolutely. I think it is. I agree. I think it's a cultural thing. And for some reason, men are more interested in those subjects than women from an early age. I don't know if it's maybe the way they're taught make it seem less interesting, because what I discovered with coding is, I mean, I didn't love maths at school, but the maths you use in coding is a lot more exciting and interesting and creative than you actually think it would be at school. So I definitely agree with that. I think initially speaking, there are more boys than girls that go into it.
And then it can, I mean, I just, from my perspective, and obviously I've gone down a different career path and I'm very happy with my career path, but you know, I would have felt so overwhelmed, and like, I would have really struggled to have the confidence to go into a class of all men. So I don't know if there's something to say for that. And then most of my other classes, it was like all women a lot of the time. So I do think, I agree, it is like a cultural thing. But would you say as well, in more industry basis, you know, the statistics I read out initially, do they ring true to your experience? Does that kind of give some insight? Because obviously it's words on a paper for me, and I don't get to go into the offices and actually see what they look like.
Absolutely, it is true. I mean, on my master's degree, I think there are 7 women. We have a WhatsApp group. It wasn't hard to find all of us, and there's about 100 students total. So that's kind of on an academic basis, the distribution. But then in the workplace as well, it is unusual to see other female developers. I think depending on the size of the company, but it is usually about 10-15% maybe, and some companies do better with that, but there are not a lot of women developers. Personally, I've been really lucky. I've worked with quite a few, and in my last 2 jobs my managers were female, and that's really unusual, especially because they were at a very senior level, which has been amazing for me. It's been great to have those role models, but I know a lot of female developers don't have the same benefit there. It's been really good for me.
That is really good, and I'm like, it's so nice to hear about like even a female manager, Because I think in terms of, on the flip side, I'm working with hiring managers a lot who are very technical and will qualify roles and we'll talk about like the market and like what's realistic when looking for a type of position. So we'll definitely have those conversations. But I mean, I think I've had only one in the past year that was like with a female hiring manager. So it's kind of, in my experience, I mostly speak to men unless I'm talking to HR or talent. That's my experience.
That's pretty normal.
Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic. And do you think it kind of affects the workplace? Would you say that it does have an impact in terms of academia and in industry?
It does. It definitely does. I wouldn't want to put any women off joining the industry because I think it's opening up a lot to women. Yes. But it does impact your work and it can get you down, especially when you're on projects or in a job with you're the only woman, and sometimes you'll get excluded from things. There might be a stag do that you're not invited to or whatever, and these things do kind of impact the day-to-day kind of how you feel, and also potentially promotions, that kind of thing is kind of worrying when you're being excluded from stuff. But in general, I think personally I haven't been too badly affected by that kind of thing. And you do get used to it, and like I said, my last two managers have been women, which has been really good for me because they kind of understand a little bit more what that's like. And they've been able to give me a bit more specific advice about how to deal with those kind of situations. So I know I'm quite lucky there, but yeah, that is kind of the situation.
Yeah, no, and I think also it says, obviously, just reading out what it mentioned last time, that the two biggest barriers are lack of mentors and lack of female role models. And obviously for you, having that female mentor who was in maybe a position that you were looking to get into, it showed it was possible. And that Absolutely. Can be so important, because if you just see, it's not, anything against men or anyone who associates differently or has different pronouns. It's not against anyone at all. It's just, if there's one set person that kind of dominates an industry, it tends to prevent more people from coming in, and everyone brings a different attitude, and everyone brings on different experience, and you can get set in doing things a certain way because no one's telling you about any other structures Definitely. Or methods or solutions that you could come to. So it can be kind of a bubble that doesn't get broken for a really long time. So that's my only concern. In terms of kind of right now, why do you think there are less women in technology, for example? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it does start really young, to be honest, because with the industry still being quite academia focused, for the most part, some people don't care. But I think that means that you have to choose these science and STEM subjects from age 13, really. When you're doing your GCSEs, you have to know you've got to do a good job. And so if you're not initially picking those subjects, it becomes too late really quick. And that was the case with me. By the time I realized I wanted to go into tech, just how overwhelming it was what I actually had to achieve. And everybody who had picked those subjects already had this massive leg up. You can just kind of do a course, get your first job. And it was hard to get into it backwards. So I think that is a massive part of it. And then once you're in the career, I think women do tend to maybe drop out of tech a bit more than men, because there are a lot of barriers there. If you haven't got that academic background already and you have come to it later, you might find there are blocks later on in your career. And it's kind of why I ended up doing my master's. I just didn't want that to become the case for me. I wanted to prove to myself I could get the academic qualification, but I think if you don't do that, some women find that there is a block at some point where the lack of that STEM degree gets in the way. So I think those are a number of reasons why you see less women in general. I think they leave more quickly than men, and then also they just don't get into it initially. So I think targeting girls at a younger age it would be really beneficial.
Yeah, And I think it's interesting, like sometimes there's that sort of, like we've had it, where we're like, do we ask about like benefits of maternity leave? And you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to say anything. But it's like, well, someone has to have a child. Like a man, it's just the fact that it's a woman who has to have a child, and you have to do what you have to do. Like it's impossible without. But it's just, even like, I think even feeling a certain way about asking those questions. And of course, like, you know, a lot of women will want to have children, and you can have children and work and come back after. But sometimes I guess kind of the late nights or the lack of flexibility sometimes kind of makes you think, oh, I don't think I would have to stop my career there and find something else to do. And
I think so many of your colleagues are men, and you worry they might not understand that kind of thing. So I can completely understand why people might see that as an issue, that they wouldn't understand your specific needs as a woman. So I think that definitely makes sense.
Yeah. And in terms of just when you were maybe thinking about applying to new jobs, or when you have applied to new jobs, have you found yourself seeing like any unconscious bias in job adverts? Is that something you've ever like experienced when looking?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't know specifically about unconscious bias, but I think job adverts, especially for tech, can be very intimidating.
Yes.
You know, there'll be pages and pages long of tech requirements that I think sometimes you see and you don't know half of them. And you realize as you go on in the industry that that's quite normal, and you're only really actually expected to tick half and learn the rest, and that is really normal. But I have read that that women especially will make sure that they pass every job requirement before they'll even apply to a job, and men don't do that so much. And that's something I've been really conscious of since reading that. So I do try to now make this effort to, if I see a job that I'm missing a few of the qualifications, I'll try go for it anyway. I just try and remind myself that that's how the men do it. So, but yeah, I think that's a big factor with job adverts, just how scary they can be, perhaps to people who are less confident in the role. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're worse at it, definitely.
No, not at all. And I've seen that same statistic. I try and mention it sometimes when like thinking about or talking to candidates from a more diverse background, and that cannot be women, it can be BAME as well. So it's very, you know, it's not just confined to women, but I think writing certain words and putting certain, you know, sometimes it leans more to a male audience. And I struggle sometimes because I'll just write as well job adverts that I'm just like, okay, it's this, but I really have to think about that, because I don't want to target one type of candidate. I want to target everyone and give everyone a fair shot of the job, really. But I would say I headhunt, you know, most of the time now it's all headhunting. You rarely get someone who responds to your advert and you put them forward, unfortunately. But in terms of my ad response, I get mostly men, and I will always have to target women. And it is that thing of, you know, men, if they match kind of 5 out of the 10 requirements, they'll apply. But if women don't match kind of 3 or less, they won't. So there can be some exclusive things there. And then I just also wanted to ask, what would you say on a personal level is important to you in a workforce? Like what makes you kind of want to join a company? And I know we've gone through this recently, but just for anyone else.
So I'd say for me personally, what's most important is the culture. And also the tech stack, I think for me is really important. Less compensation, I think, as long as you're being compensated fairly for your skill set and you're aware of what your market rate is, you know, that's a lot less important, because if you hate your job, it's really just not worth it. So for me, I'd like to make sure I'm always learning. That's always a priority for me, and I think that's quite a common concern in tech, that you go stale because technologies move so fast. So as long as I'm learning, and whether that's, you know, a new language or a technology or leadership skills or anything, that's fine. That's what I'm looking for. And the culture as well is really important. And just making sure I'm going to feel comfortable on that team, and there's a good atmosphere there. I really do think that that's quite important when you join a team, to get a good vibe from everybody.
I think so as well. And I think there's just, as time goes on, companies are realizing it's not that easy to attract talent, and there's so much competition. And sometimes when you're in a startup or even at a big company and you're working there, you can forget there's so many more options for candidates and what they can move forward into, that you really need to make yourself an attractive employer, but also promote the right things within your own company. And, you know, if someone does step out of line, if someone does say something that is inappropriate, it's addressed. And it's not just, you know, part of, you know, that's how people are, and it needs to be brought up at the time. So I hope it is moving in the right direction. And I just thought it would be good. Obviously, there's a lot to work on in the tech / you know, more specifically the AI industry for me. But what would you say are the highlights of your career, just so people know how exciting it can be?
Yes, so in terms of milestones that have felt really good, obviously landing the first job felt like a big achievement, because I had to work so hard to get there. And just that feeling of getting the first job was brill. And then after that, definitely getting onto my master's degree, that was another big achievement for me, and something that I think a lot of people maybe didn't think I could do. So that felt really good. But in terms of just general day-to-day on the job work, I've done a few hackathons that are really fun. I think that's unique to the tech industry, being able to participate in stuff like that. And they're really good fun. One of them was actually in Helsinki. My last company flew a few of us out, and we were all women, so we were the only, I think, all-female hackathon team performing. So that was really good. That was just really good fun. So things like that, they'll always stand out as highlights. Whether you win or not, it's still really cool to get involved in those kind of things, and it's already an achievement to get into the hackathons. So that's always super fun. And I've had a few projects as well that have just been amazing to work on. And I'll definitely keep those skills that I learned for a long time. So I've had loads of exciting opportunities, I think, so far.
Perfect. And is there anything that the industry could do you think, to like motivate people to kind of join, you know, whether it's a software job or a research job? You know, I know you mentioned the hackathons, just more things like that maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think motivating people with kind of benefits isn't always the best way forward. I know a lot of people just ignore them on a job application, and you're looking for that kind of general vibe. But I think things like allowing your employees to do things like hackathons, or I always look for things like learning budgets, or, you know, talk budget, so that you know that they're going to support you if you're wanting to learn something new. And just an openness to supporting that person in something that they're wanting to do in their career, if that's learning a new language or trying out a new role, moving from data to engineering or something. I think it can be a big ask, but if a company's open to letting you explore new areas, that's a really big tick.
So more like transitional careers internally as well, like
I think being open to just letting your employees explore a bit, even if that's only kind of an hour a week or whatever. But I think just having an openness to allowing your employees to grow in some way, that's really cool.
And what advice would you give to like a younger Catherine who may have questioned whether it was like the right career for her?
So my little brother, actually, he's 18, a lot younger than me, and he's doing all of this stuff at the moment, looking at his career. And I've kind of given him the same advice that I wish I'd given myself, which is do give computer science a chance, even if not everything sounds interesting, because it just gives you so many opportunities. And I do kind of wish I'd looked at it a bit earlier. I'm glad I've done a full circle. You know, I started with languages, I did the computer science, and now I'm coming back to kind of computational linguistics. So I am glad it's worked out for me. But for a younger girl who's thinking about maybe joining the tech industry, just you have to think about it a bit sooner if you want an easy ride, and just have a go at coding online. There's so many resources out there. I think Harvard have released their full CS50 course for free, which is I've had a go at, and that's really good. So there's so many opportunities now just to get started and give it a go, and just try it out. It is a lot more fun than you think.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. And I guess the last question, where will you be in 10 years time?
Yeah, that's tricky,
Yeah.
because everything moves so fast. But I'd definitely say, in a more vague sense, I'd really like to either be leading a team, or perhaps opening my own business. I have a few ideas of ventures I'd like to give a go. But I think just being in a position where I can help people the same way my managers have helped me in the past, and let me grow, because that opportunity has been great, and I don't know if I would even still be in tech if it wasn't for some of my managers. So I'd just love to do that for someone else, but I know it's not going to be boring, because everything in tech is exciting, and there's so many industries that are going to grow really quick in the next 10 years. So whether that's here or in the States or wherever, I know I'm going to be having fun, so I'm not too worried.
No, I'm not worried either, especially with the progress you've made already. And I think the fact that you want to kind of give back in the same way is really amazing. And I can see you already, just your mannerisms and how you go about things, and you're very kind of firm but fair. And I think that will really, really serve you well. And hopefully we can work together then and just continue working together, because it's just it's just so exciting to like see this happening more, just seeing more diverse candidates get into jobs where when I started it was much worse. So I can see the progression happening, and I'm very excited by that. But at the same time, we have to talk about things, and that's why I thought it was so important to actually get hands-on real life stories of people who have experienced this, that, and whatever. And the only way we're going to actually make change is by having these conversations and actually thinking, okay, what are the solutions? Is it kind of putting more learning budgets in place? And everyone will have a different answer, but I think it will be really powerful. So I'm very hopeful. I am hopeful. And I hope, if anyone was watching this, who, for example, was at a London-based university and was studying, for example, German, but had a passion for that it might kind of sway them otherwise. And everything does happen for a reason. Your role now ties in so nicely with the start of your, more professional academic career. So, we can't look back and think we should have done things differently, but it was really interesting to hear your story, and thank you so much again for doing this.
Thanks, Anna.
I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can have some more conversations with people so that we get a bit more, more openness, more kind of stories, etc.
This has been really good, and thanks for doing this. It's going to be amazing to watch and learn everybody else's stories as well.
Yes, exactly, because everyone's is so different. So it just shows you can come in from any background and give it a go.